I believe that in both spirit and substance, our tax system has come to be un-American. Death and taxes may be inevitable, but unjust taxes are not.
There is no law, and to date, nobody has been able to show that there is a law for the average American citizen working day in and day out to pay an income tax.
You know that 96% of Americans were born tax exempt and unknowingly volunteered to become taxpayers the first time they filed a Form 1040 contract with the IRS. Unless the taxpayer decides to opt out of their tax liability legally, they are expected to voluntarily comply and pay the income tax. Everything paid to the IRS is considered a gift or bequest to the United States, and if you check our law books, you find this fact scattered all throughout the United States Code. They tell us this over and over and over again. This is because 99% of Americans don't know they volunteered to become taxpayers, and unless they legally opt out or undergo the process to eliminate their tax liability, they must pay a voluntary gift called an income tax every single year. The average tax professional or CPA will not willingly disclose this information to you, but the law allows you to completely opt out of your income tax liability and stop giving voluntary gifts to the IRS. This is done by choosing to work with the U.S. Treasury. Choosing to work with the U.S. Treasury makes 100% of your income non-taxable. This secret is intentionally hidden from U.S. taxpayers because this process allows you to legally opt out of the income tax.
I'll accept it from the Internal Revenue Service, and our service is based on voluntary compliance, a faith and belief that the service is on their side.
But every American, if we're going to have voluntary compliance at the high rate we continue to have in America, it's got to be perceived as a fair system, that what's asked of me is also asked of him or her. And
our voluntary tax system depends on our taxpayers trusting that it works fairly.
The most important measure to me is the voluntary compliance rate. Going forward, are they voluntarily compliant as opposed to what they did in the past?
The very functioning of the federal government depends on the American people's willingness to voluntarily pay the taxes that they owe.
To having to prove themselves again after they already did with voluntary tax compliance.
So being able to communicate with them in language, on writing, online, and whatnot is very important to us. And that helps the front end, which helps the voluntary compliance rate.
We believe also that lack of congressional support for the IRS could adversely affect individuals' attitudes towards participation in our voluntary compliance tax system.
And what is the purpose of an audit conducted by the IRS?
To hopefully make sure that people, when they are voluntarily complying, are actually complying with the statutes.
There is no law that requires the average American worker in the private sector to pay a direct unapportioned tax on their labor and compensation for services. There is no law.
You can look through the statutes and look for the law that requires you to pay. And when you do that, you can't identify a law that requires the average person in America who earns a wage and works in private business to pay an income tax.
You have to understand that an agency which will unlawfully impose a tax that doesn't exist is not going to care. If we, the people, don't know what our rights are, they're not going to tell us.
Of course there's a tax gap. Duh. I mean, we have a voluntary system. And when we first imposed an income tax in America, and the constitutionality of it was litigated.
I had to leave the IRS because I presented evidence that I had accumulated indicating that the agency was violating the law and violating people's rights. And I asked the agency for a response to my sincere concerns. And the answer I got was that they would not respond to my concerns and that they would provide me with the paperwork necessary to tender my resignation. If Americans just learned that the IRS was actually knowingly deceiving them, that would be enough for them to rise up and put a stop to it.
A lot of people might say, well, gee, if there wasn't an income tax, what would happen to education? They don't understand that education is paid for the most part, out of state and local taxes, your property tax. People might say, well, how are we going to build and maintain our highways if there's no money coming into the government? We need our highways. There is a tax on every gallon of gasoline that people buy. Proceeds from the income tax do not pay for highway construction.
100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt. All individual income tax revenues are gone before 1 nickel is spent on the services taxpayers expect from government. People have been told, that you need this income tax system to fund government, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, my question is, well, if that's true, how did we fund government from 1776 to 1913?
And as much as we know that the folks at IRS have a thankless job because they have to go and tell their fellow Americans that they may be audited or they have to do this work understaffed, we have to maintain the confidence in the system because it's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes.
Agreed.
And so you are right, it was a foolish mistake, but the President's even more correct that it was outrageous and intolerable. Now, let me also focus on something, Mr. George, you said. When you were asked, was there any finding or evidence of political motivation here, you said no.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. And so what we find is a situation where inexcusable activity took place because it erodes the confidence of the American people in a system where they participate voluntarily. And if there's a place in public service where you have to have the highest level of conduct and standards, it's at the IRS. And so, Mr. Miller, I think it's unfortunate for those who are in positions of authority, but the buck has to stop somewhere, and I think that's exactly what we're saying. That should not diminish the good work that has been done by anyone within the IRS over the years. And so I hope you understand that you are here today talking to us because we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to clean up and clear out so we can go back to the business of making sure that people respect the fact that we have a voluntary system of paying our taxes.
That as these discussions occur, it's damaging to the morale of those people, it's probably ultimately damaging to the sense of voluntary compliance, which underlies our entire tax system.
As we all know, that our U.S. tax system is a voluntary tax system, and we depend on people willing every year to sit down, fill out that form, and pay their appropriate amount of taxes. So I really think enforcement is a reward to those who voluntarily comply. And I think if the public does not see that the IRS is enforcing the laws, we're going to be at risk of losing people continuing to voluntarily comply.
You have no idea what I did in the White House. I stopped wars with France. France, you know the France story? They were going to charge us, think of this, 25% to all America. I have to protect American companies, whether we like them or not. Some of them I didn't even like.
Sort of Trump talking about the no tax on tips. One thing he said in that Joe Rogan podcast that I think raised a lot of eyebrows is he talked about eliminating the income tax. This is what he said. Take a listen.
Did you just float out the idea of getting rid of income taxes and replacing it with tariffs?
Well, okay.
Were you serious about that?
Yeah, sure. But why not? Because ready? Our country was the richest relatively in the 1880s and 1890s. A president who was assassinated named McKinley. He was the tariff king. And then around in the early 1900s, they switched over stupidly to, frankly, an income tax. And you know why? Because countries were putting a lot of pressure on America. We don't want to pay tariffs. Please don't. Believe me, they control our politicians.
The biggest thing that nobody even knows about, and it's all signed, and it goes into effect on January 1st. And you better make sure I win. Can you imagine?
The IRS is not an agency of the federal government, and the federal government has stated so in open court. This fact was presented in the United States Court of Appeals, Schultz versus Internal Revenue Service, 2005. The IRS cannot apply force against a taxpayer without a court order either. Quoting directly from the court decision, absent an effort to seek enforcement through a federal court, IRS summonses apply no force to taxpayers, and no consequence whatever can befall a taxpayer who refuses, ignores, or otherwise does not comply with an IRS summons until that summons is backed by a federal court order. A taxpayer cannot be held in contempt, arrested, detained, or otherwise punished for refusing to comply with the original IRS summons, no matter the taxpayer's reasons or lack of reasons for so refusing. The Federal Reserve isn't any better. The Federal Reserve is a privately owned corporation that was created in 1913. The name Federal Reserve is intentional. It is no more federal than Federal Express or American than Bank of America. With the creation of the Federal Reserve came the income tax. Since the Federal Reserve was enacted, 96% of the value of the dollar has been destroyed. So what does the Federal Reserve have to do with taxes? Everything. The IRS is the debt collection arm of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a private corporation which authorizes the U.S. Treasury to print currency, which it loans to the United States, with interest. This is what creates our national debt. Every Federal Reserve note that gets printed into circulation becomes an obligation of the U.S. government to pay back directly to the Federal Reserve with interest. And Uncle Sam passes the bill to us. Paying off this national debt is the sole and only reason why we have an income tax. But did you know using Federal Reserve currency is voluntary? And paying the income tax is also voluntary once you learn how to opt out of the Federal Reserve System. This is America's best-kept secret. Notice the two seals on the Federal Reserve currency. 99% of Americans were never taught the difference. Did you know you always had a choice on which seal to use? On the left-hand side, the Federal Reserve symbol. The use of this symbol processes your money through the Federal Reserve System and creates a taxable event when receiving income. Any money put into your bank account is automatically treated as Federal Reserve currency, which is taxable. If you ever heard that if you put more than $10,000 into your bank account, they will report you to the IRS, this is why. You are using their currency. But did you know you had a choice to bypass the IRS and the Federal Reserve completely? This is done by using...
Made remarks from the stage at the party.
Thank you, and to Melania and my family. We're all here tonight. We want to thank you all very much. It's a great honor, and we're going to do a great job as a president. We're going to do a great job. We're going to turn this big stick and make it better than ever before. The country is going to be better than ever before. So thank you all for being here tonight. It's a record night in every way, and we really appreciate it. Very, very special people. Tremendous credit.
President Trump tear down the IRS.
Okay, here's what I want you to do. Go to the IRS website, look for their criminal investigation annual reports, read through all of these, go search for the word voluntary, and you read what they say. Because if you look in the reports, they tell you over and over that our tax system is based on voluntary compliance. They expect taxpayers to voluntarily meet tax filing obligations. Again, they say compliance with the tax laws in the United States depend heavily on taxpayers' self-assessment of the amount of tax, voluntary filing of tax returns, and remittance of any tax owed, which means if you don't know how to properly declare all of your income as non-taxable on your tax forms, you're going to pay voluntary income taxes. And they say it every single year. The purpose that the IRS Criminal Investigation Organization exists is to catch the bad people and encourage and promote voluntary compliance and confidence in good everyday Americans like yourself. But the law that they're enforcing is based on voluntary compliance. And that's not a secret either. It's right here in the tax return forms and instructions. If you ever trusted somebody to do your taxes before, they should at least know that the basic forms and instructions say that the tax system is based on voluntary compliance. Why don't more CPAs announce this? And to take things a step further, final nail in the coffin, there is no such thing as income tax. You can see here, it's over and over and over in the law books, that there's no such thing as an income tax. What you're paying is deemed to be a gift, device, or bequest to or for the use of the United States. It's not a secret either. They have this over 10 plus times in the law book. Anything you pay in income tax is considered as a gift or bequest to or for the use of the United States. That's why they expect you to pay it voluntarily. A gift does not need to be returned. Now, I'm going to show you how to opt out legally. What you must do is file your taxes with the 12411 process. You can file your taxes and declare all your income as taxable, like 99% of Americans do. Every tax professional you talk to is going to encourage you to do it this way because that's what the IRS trained them to do. Or you can file your taxes with the 12411 process and report all of your income as non-taxable. Now, you're filing, that's what the IRS wants you to do, but now you never have to pay, and there's never a back and forth. It's never questionable. Just report all your income as non-taxable and opt out of the income tax simply, easily, and legally. That's all you need to do.